So I want to welcome you all to this webinar. My name is Ingolf Ernest. I am a director and co-founder of PSL, and I'm delighted to have with me today Kate Pym from MiHomecare and Max Wurr from City and County Healthcare. Just thought we'd give you a quick update in terms of the agenda. So during the session you will be on mute, but there is ample opportunity, and we're very keen to encourage the asking of questions. So you've got a panel on the right-hand side where you can put down your questions. In terms of the agenda, a quick intro, then Max will go first for about 10 minutes and give us his views on outcome-based commissioning, what's the impact on providers. Kate will go second, once again about 10 minutes. She'll focus a bit more on integrated commissioning. We will then have a panel debate and then wrap up your questions. So I'm hoping that works for everyone. And I guess before we kick off, I guess the question is, why is PS Health interested in outcomes? And we really deliver software to providers of health and care in the home. And our vision is to remove the paper, connect systems, and really create seamless communication between the field and the office. And I guess there are three forces that we see at play that we're very excited about. One is obviously technology, in that the cost of devices is going down dramatically. Personally, having seen care workers out in the field using this technology, it's quite exciting. Secondly, commissioners, and that's a big part of the topic today, are increasingly looking for proof of delivery. I mean, this ranges from call monitoring in the home care sector at kind of the hygiene factor level almost. But I think more importantly, looking to providers to document value. And the last bit, of course, is that there are significant cost pressures in this business, or in this sector. And we know that there's lots of rekeying going on. We know there's lots of rotas being changed around. And I guess in this space, we really see the opportunity for a platform for intelligent care delivery. But with no further ado, let's go on, and I'd like to introduce Max first. Max is a director of City and County Healthcare. He's really a veteran industry, and I'm delighted that we have him here with 20 years of experience. He's worked from, what's unique I think about Max is he's worked from the service delivery at the cold phase as a care worker up through branch manager, regional manager, and now on the board of one of the largest home care providers in the UK. You will have seen City and County has made a number of acquisitions. They are also expanding into more complex care. So I'm sure Max will have some very interesting views on this. It's worth mentioning that while Max has been with City and County, the organization has grown from roughly 15 branches to now over 85 branches, and that Max is also a board member of the UK Home Care Association and has been working with NICE on guidelines. So with that, Max, if the technology here works and you can hear us, if I can hand over to you, please.
Hi, yeah, thanks very much, Ingolf. I hope everybody can hear me. Very nice to be described as a veteran. You're getting to a stage in your career or just your life when somebody refers to you in that way. I don't feel always like a veteran, but then sometimes I feel like I've been working in this industry for about 10 decades. So, but anyway, I was very interested and excited to be asked by Ingolf to talk to everybody today about outcome-based commissioning in home care in particular. And I know that Kate's going to be talking about integration of health and social care and outcomes, which is obviously a bit of a hot topic at the moment. My experience in developing outcome-based services goes back over 10 years to the early to mid 2000s, when we were one of the providers selected to deliver services on behalf of Thurrock Council. And at the time, people were quite excited about outcomes as a sort of buzzword in delivering home care. And I guess, I mean, anybody in our sector, and especially over the last 5 years, has probably become increasingly cynical about the chances we have of achieving some of the things that were laid out in the vision that was sort of put before us in the 10 years ago or so. And there's been a lot of talk about outcomes. There's barely a service specification in the country that doesn't put itself out there as being outcome-based. But the question is whether or not commissioners are actually commissioning services in a way that does promote better outcomes for the people that receive our services. And as I say, I have a certain amount of cynicism, certainly in some areas, as to whether or not that is ever really being achieved. But things started off pretty optimistically, and we did actually do some work with the Social Policy Research Unit in when we were doing our work with Thurrock. And at that time, there was a fairly well-established concept of what we meant by outcomes in a social care, particularly a home care service. And we were talking about the ways in which we could gauge the difference that we were making in the lives of the people that we were supporting. And typically those outcomes are classified as being change outcomes, which were getting a person from one point to another point, and those are typically the kind of outcomes that can be most tangibly measured. Then there were what were referred to as process outcomes, which were those that were to do with the way in which the service was delivered. So it was about supporting people in such a way as to promote dignity and respect and choice, and all those words that we're familiar with from the 2006 white paper, and that have been featured in various policy documents since. And then there was maintenance outcomes, which was exactly what it says, the idea that there are certain things that people need every day that we ought to be able to support them with. The work we originally did on outcomes tried very much to individualize those outcomes as much as possible. So we weren't talking about generic outcomes that could be applied to everybody. Our starting point was to say, well, what is it that this person wants out of the support that we're going to give them? And it could be something very, very personalized. And I'm still very much of the view that that ought to be our starting point. And this has been a difficult battle because of the distinction that still challenges us all between outcomes and outputs. What do we get at the other end of the intervention, if that's the technical term that we'll use. And we still make that mistake. We still think that, for example, or I constantly come across people who will say, for example, that having breakfast is an outcome. And to me, it's not. Having breakfast is an output. It's something you did. The outcome would be to do with supporting nutrition and hydration, or whatever that might be, or it might be something much more personal to do with maintaining social ties and that kind of thing. So that was what we were talking about when we talked about outcomes, at least in my experience, until we came across the economic downturn, and things got a bit nasty at that point. I don't think there's anybody listening that's involved in either providing or commissioning services that will claim that things have been easy for the last 5 years or so. And again, in my experience, and I spent a long time writing tender bids for the organisation I worked for, so I've seen lots of commissioning practices, and I've read lots of tender documentations and contracts, and looked at the way that that bids are evaluated. And there is no doubt that the emphasis in the last 5 years has increasingly been on cost. And whilst commissioners continue to pay lip service to outcomes, the very clear sense I've had is that cost has become the overriding factor. And now, interestingly, I'm finding that the dialogue in relation to outcomes seems to be much more about economics. It's much more about the outcomes in the way that clinicians are used to speaking about them. So, you know, whereas in social care we were all into touchy-feely outcomes, outcomes when you run a hospital is to do with numbers of beds, numbers of infections, number of weeks waiting, and so on. And I think that we're seeing more and more of that in social care as well, as the public purse becomes increasingly pressured. So in many ways, commissioners, when they talk about outcomes, I think are thinking about economics rather than well-being and the outcomes for individuals. But of course, this isn't necessarily all bad from the perspective of providers, because one of the big issues I think about outcomes has always been making them measurable, and commissioners of home care have always found it much more easy to argue over and tot up minutes of care provided by a provider than they have to evaluate whether or not the outcomes have been achieved for that particular service. And I don't doubt that plenty of people listening today will have had those kind of experiences with local authorities, where often we're asking how much has been provided, how long did it take, rather than what difference did we make to the life of the person that we were supporting. But if those economic factors are becoming much more important and much more prevalent, there are opportunities there, I think, for providers to demonstrably show that they can achieve tangible outcomes that are measurable and that therefore can have a measurable economic value. Can we have the next slide? Oh, good. That means you're all still there anyway. That's good. Okay, so we are in a pressured environment, absolutely. In terms of where we've got to with outcomes in today's commissioning environment, I don't think anybody can have any realistic expectation that funding will increase. I've had a lot of discussions about this recently. We've had DIL not, and we've got the CARE Act, but nowhere near the amount of money that is needed in order to accommodate our ageing population is likely to be coming down the line in the near future. So this is an environment we have to live with. It's a stretched environment, and we need to innovate as much as we can, despite a lot of people feeling very demoralised, I think. And increasingly, commissioners are wanting more for less. We're certainly finding that with the tightening of the eligibility criteria over recent years, that the level of complexity of the needs of people that we're supporting is ever higher, and that there's much less scope for being creative about the kind of outcomes that we're able to deliver. And I do find that very disheartening as somebody with a background as a care provider, but certainly when the original campaigners were really pushing for self-directed support to be rolled out, people like In Control and a lot of physical disabilities campaigners, the vision that they had of what a personalised outcome-based service meant was very far removed from what I think most of us are experiencing today in terms of what we're able to actually deliver on the ground. But with this increase in complexity, there are also opportunities in terms of how we're able to integrate, and as no doubt everybody will be aware, there is money money that is apparently being made available for health and social care integration. This thing that that's called the Better Care Fund, which various parties should be able to access in the future in order to develop integration. And that will be crucial, because I do strongly believe that the system we have at the moment and the way that services, that our kind of services, social care, community-based social care services are commissioned, is already unfit for purpose. And whilst as I said, every specification that you read talks about outcomes, we are still being commissioned to provide services largely on a task and time basis, with some exceptions, no doubt some of which we'll talk about today. So can we have the next slide there, Ingolf? Okay, so where do I think we're going to go with all of this? The CARE Act, which was received royal assent a couple of weeks ago, as everybody will no doubt have heard, is, I think, an extremely important piece of legislation. But at the moment, providers and commissioners and everybody else is sort of still waiting to see what it actually means for practical purposes, I think. I think you will probably be aware that there's a lot of regulations that are currently out for consultation, and there will be a process over the next few months of that gradually crystallising, and commissioners and providers alike gradually having a sense of what the CARE Act is going to require of us. But what we do know already is that well-being is a central theme, and that for the first time well-being is enshrined as effectively a statutory right. And I do think that will be very interesting over the next few years. I think we will start to see court cases in which people are challenging the decisions that are being made by commissioners, and I think that will be good for providers. I think there will be more opportunities for providers to be more creative, and there will be a greater emphasis on what we actually do in terms of making a difference to people, rather than simply tending to their basic physical needs as a very minimum, and sometimes not even that, as I think some of us will know from real life examples. So that's really important. There's also in the consultations that are currently underway, there is a clear emphasis on commissioners assessing need on the basis of outcomes rather than on what was described as deficit. So this will be about not assessing how many things people can't do, but rather about starting from the point of saying where do we need to get to, and then assessing for needs and resources on that basis. And I think that has to be very exciting, because those of us that have been trying to achieve outcomes over the past few years have found it very difficult when the resource allocation systems tend to be a circular equation, if you like. They tend to calculate the amount of money that can be provided on the amount of time that would be needed to provide the care to support the individual. So it's circular. All you're doing is reinforcing the old task-time system. I don't know quite how that will change, but I'm trying to be optimistic that it will. But one way or another, we're going to need new models. There are some exciting new models in the offing. Some local authorities that are taking real brave leaps into the darkness. Wiltshire is one of the ones that is currently being cited, and I think Kate's going to talk about that, and I'm sure that'll enter into the discussion. I don't think the Wiltshire argument has been won, and there's quite a few reasons for that. And I do find it a little unnerving how many other local authorities seem to be willing to sort of jump into that particular model before even Wiltshire themselves have got any real evidence that it works, as far as I can make out. But we can no doubt have that discussion. But certainly we need investment and we need innovation. It's clearly a difficult time financially for providers to be going out there and spending money on coming up with the new ideas. But without wanting to big up Ingolf too much, some of the products and systems that PS Health are developing are not necessarily very expensive to implement, but can be, I think, extremely effective, not just in delivering outcomes, but also in saving on admin and backroom processes, back office processes, and so on. And that brings me neatly on to my final point, which is really to do with technology. I'm a great advocate. I've despite being a veteran, I have grown up as a reasonably tech-savvy person, and I've long thought that we were coming to the point at which lightweight, cheap mobile technology was going to revolutionise the way that we provide social care. And I'm still amazed how much paper is generated and shoveled around by social care providers, including ourselves, but we are working on trying to automate some of those working processes. And ultimately, if we can have well-designed, user-friendly interfaces, we can manage information in a much more effective way that will ultimately benefit service users. So yes, I think these are exciting times. I think there are plenty of opportunities, and I think the economic circumstances, whilst very difficult, will also provide their own opportunities for providers to come up with these kind of solutions. So thank you very much. That's all I have to say at the moment.
Max, that's excellent, and I think a great sort of taking us through the journey from a veteran, if I dare say it. What we'll do, and if people have questions for Max or anyone else, use the question tab on the right hand of your screen. But what I'd like to do now is to hand over to Kate Sim, and Kate, really great to have you. She's the relationship director for MiHomecare. MiHomecare, as I'm sure you're aware, is also one of the largest home care providers in the UK. So I feel we're privileged in having two very large players and two real industry experts with us today. MiHomecare is owned by Mighty following the acquisition of Enara, and I'm sure you will also see that Mighty recently purchased the Complete Care Group, which is interesting. Kate has really been instrumental in developing the service proposition and working in partnership with commissioners. And I think what will be particularly interesting, Kate, to hear from you is around the work you've done on integrated commissioning and how that's looking. So with that, Kate, can we hand over to you?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thanks very much, Max. I agree with an awful lot of what you have to say, based around are we looking at outcomes or outputs, but I do think that things are starting to change, and part of that change is integrated commissioning. And as you already said, there is an absolute need for change. The current health and social care system that are in place can't sustain the forecast growth that's anticipated in demand, particularly in relationship to a growing elderly population. And also, as healthcare crosses new boundaries, we will have an increasing number of people that go through a longer life with a long-lasting disability. So all of these people need to be catered for with a reduced amount of money to pay for it all. So small changes won't be sufficient. Tweaks and little alterations around the edges will not be enough to meet the challenge of the forthcoming years. And joint commissioning is here. It's real. We can't pretend it's not going to happen anymore, although it is in the early days. And my most recent experience, not inclusive of work that I'm doing at the present time, would be the Keep Safe, Stay Well service, which was an early intervention prevention service for the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. Now, this particular service was jointly commissioned by Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, CCG, and the Borough Council. And interestingly, it did combine across those boundaries, looking for outcomes right the way across. But interestingly, as it's an early days situation, what those outcomes were to be was very much an open conversation during the process. So that actually leads me on to my next point, which is actually understanding your commissioning environment. So before the debate starts, and if possible before the ODU is published, understanding the environment that you're working in, understanding your local commissioners, and having a thorough knowledge of the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, because believe me, if you're not asked in the bid, you will be asked in the dialogue that you've read it. Understanding these factors actually helps you frame the discussion and frame the questions that may arise throughout the bid process, and helps you position yourself as a collaborative support within the process. Whether you win that bid or not, going forward, it's a great learning exercise. There's an awful lot that can be taken away from these processes. And to actually be recognised as a stakeholder within that environment, i.e. by inclusion in meetings for the new NICE agenda, etc., it actually helps you help them. And to be the person that is helping your customers is to be the trusted ally rather than the combatant, which we all too often end up as in a commissioning environment. So my next point would be, Ingolf actually asked me this, is this the next big opportunity? And that has a dual answer. It absolutely is. Because as you move into joint commissioning, as I was saying about the ongoing commissioning that's happening between local councils and CCGs, they're generally led by social care commissioning with a sort of by-the-side nod and a little bit of money from the CCG. Now, once people get braver, if they get led by healthcare, we're not going to be dipping toes in. We'll be dipping entire villages. We're talking moving from a few hundred or maybe 1,000, 2,000 people into many, many thousands of people. And we're going to look at opportunities that are so large that you cannot possibly meet that need on your own. You have to start thinking about an integrated response to an integrated bid. So where you may find people who had, and organisations that had previously been your direct competitors, we need to start doing what we're telling them to do, and that's talking to each other, breaking down barriers, and looking for opportunities where we can all gain, and we can all remain in business and make that business both profitable and improved for the quality of life for the people that are in receipt of our care. So sort of adding a bit more into what I was saying about market and your environment. There are so many people out there when you look at integrated commissioning. Who do you really need to talk to? Do you need to talk to the GP? Do you need to talk to the advisors to the CCG? Is it the police service? There are so many inputs into integrated commissioning because the inputs are initiated prior to that commission. They actually start with the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, which flows through from the Health and Wellbeing Board. So who are the key influencers? And, you know, let's be honest, just because somebody's influential doesn't mean that they'll talk to you. So it's a matter of finding who's out there that will talk to you and can influence, which is obviously teaching grandmothers to suck eggs, and being a grandmother and not being good at sucking eggs is probably not a good idea. But the main objectives for a specific health economy are outlined, as I said, in the JSNA. And what you need to do is actually analyse what is important in that and aligns with the objectives for your organisation and any partnership organisations that you may be working with, because collaboration is the way forward. And once you understand what you really want that aligns with what they really want, then you can start getting down to the nitty-gritty of what are the questions, what are the genuine outcomes that are required. Do you want people to live longer, or do you want people to have longer lives worth living? There are several questions that need to be aligned before you can actually put together a good response to a good bid. And in an ideal world, you will have actually had those conversations prior to that tender going out. So, as I said, aligning with your commissioners is about very much understanding their environment, and not just their Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. The Health and Social Care Information Centre is also a good resource to actually understand how much your commissioners for social care are spending. There is also the Atlas of Variation and various other accessible information on the internet now, where you can find out the information about your health and social care environment. And as I said, I don't think we can repeat this often enough. Work collaboratively with the other people that work within that environment. Taking all this into account and looking at the evolution of the systems that we're within at the moment, everybody is looking for more with less. And in order to not just achieve the efficiencies that are required to meet the financial needs of these contracts, but also to facilitate integrated working, not just amongst yourselves and your partners that you may have on any particular contract, but across those within the health and social care economy. Evidence of what you're doing, where you are and how you're getting there is really, really important. which is why we're obviously talking with PS Health and working closely with them, because their technology does support integrated working and evidence-based care. And evidence-based care is going to become increasingly important. As NICE came into the social care arena this year and started looking for evidence to support best practice, as they have done in healthcare for many, many years, what they came back with was very, very little. So if you're working in an integrated environment in particular, healthcare always needs evidence. There's very little evidence in the social care arena. NICE has moved into the social care arena. Going forward, the same will apply to social care. But while we're in this period between the two, those companies that accept this and start gathering that information and producing the evidence of the quality and the outcomes for the people that they work for, then they're the ones that going forwards can evidence best practice. They're the ones going forwards that can demonstrate that we're meeting the outcomes that are actually required by the populations that we're serving. I would say also the need itself is evolving, and sometimes collecting evidence that things aren't right is just as important as collecting evidence that things are fantastic. So this actually helps frame an open dialogue for new services which have never been run before. As an example, in the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, that service has never existed anywhere else in the UK. That service was written by ourselves and the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead in collaboration. And we know, as I said during dialogue, that until someone's actually delivering the service, it's only an idea. And ideas aren't always right. So if we're open from the beginning that what we're doing may need changing, we can evidence and see where that change is required and take action before it's a problem, and be open and honest with our customers, which is really important to them. And, you know, as has been said in all sorts of arenas, it's not about the problems that occur, it's how you manage the problems. Because some of your best relationships with customers could actually be created by managing a situation rather than by providing a consistent, good service. They'll remember when things weren't right, or there was a flood, or some crisis occurred, and you stepped up and you did it right. And that's all about the evidence. So again, there are increasing changes in the sorts of services that they're looking for as well, with an eye to the Integrated Commission. So rapid response and admission avoidance, these things where they're actually looking for outcomes across health and social care. So it may be a bit scary to step out of social care and start looking at the needs of healthcare, but an understanding of how the discharge process works, an understanding of bed allocation, and where the pressures sit with any particular hospital, where they are meeting targets, where they are slipping. The same goes for the CCG and primary care. So going forward, integrated care could actually encompass primary, secondary and social. And under that environment, you actually have to understand the challenges by each of those sectors. The information's out there, it's all in the public arena, but it's about knowing the questions to ask and what to look for. But there's plenty of opportunity to find those answers.
Okay, that's excellent. And look, I mean, I think a number of really interesting themes are coming up here. It'd be interesting, Max, I don't know if you have any thoughts in and around integrated commissioning, and I guess the other thing I'd like to sort of throw into that question, Max, is around personal budget and choice and how that works. And I'll also throw in the bit about the balance of power in the health and well-being boards. And so any thoughts on that we'll be interested in, and maybe Kate will may have a couple of views on that as well. Are you with us, Max?
Hello. Yeah, hello. Sorry, Ingolf. I was muted and then couldn't find my button.
That's all right.
Sorry, yes. Right. Yeah. In terms of in terms of integration, I mean, it's interesting to hear what Kate's says on all of that. Her organisation has got some way further down the road to providing these kind of integrated services. We're doing some work with reablement and some home from hospital services as well on a fairly small scale. I don't feel especially well qualified to comment on some of those elements in relation to more integrated services, although I'm very interested to hear about them. I mean, in terms of personal budgets, I mean, the challenge continues, or perhaps the biggest challenge I think continues to be the way in which health and social care interface with one another. And whilst I think Kate's absolutely right, the providers need to be putting themselves out there and actually getting in front of commissioners and having these conversations. In a way, we can try and act as brokers between health and social care, because I think that there remains something of a chasm between those two domains, and a very different culture and a very different sort of understanding of lots of things, including outcomes, as you know, as I intimated earlier. I would mention as well, sorry, just as Kate was running through some of the really good sources of intelligence for providers, one thing that we've been doing a lot of work on is looking at the market position statements, which are documents that local authorities have had to create as part of the developing care markets for quality. Oh, can I remember the DC? I don't know. It's a program being run by IPC Brooks, supported by the Department of Health and ADAS. And every local authority in the country, as a sort of a part of this program, has had to produce a market position statement, and they are very good. And well, I say they're very good. Some of them are very good. Some of them are not so good. I've read quite a few of them, but in the best instances, they are an excellent snapshot of the vision for commissioning and the commissioning needs in every local authority area, and some of them go so far as to literally saying, you know, these are the services we currently don't have that we need. So any provider that's looking for something, some way to innovate, and a lot of those services are have plenty of scope for integration. That's a really important place to be looking, I think. So you can find those online. They're not all in one place, unfortunately, so you'll have to go to your local authority website and look for the market position statement, but I would do that. So yeah, I don't know. Otherwise, I'm not sure. I suspect there are. Sorry.
Yeah. No, Mike. Look, I think that's very good feedback, and that's good advice. Would you, before we go to Kate and just talk about the sort of balance between on the health and well-being boards, any thoughts around personal budgets and how that's impacting, I guess, maybe so specifically the more traditional home care business?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a big believer in self-directed support, but I do get frustrated, I think, with the way in which direct payments are spoken of as if they mean the same thing as a personal budget, and of course they don't. You know, direct payment is one way that you can receive a personal budget, but I have long argued that it's quite possible, or should be quite possible, to achieve outcomes for individuals without having to burden them necessarily with the responsibility of managing their own budgets and finances. And there are ways of doing that, obviously. I mean, people will have heard about individual service funds and the virtual budgets and all that sort of stuff. But it does bother me, I think, that sometimes the uptake of direct payments is used as if it's some sort of indicator of personalisation. And I have a number of personal experiences of people having been effectively put onto a direct payment without really understanding what it meant. And in fact, the net effect in terms of the service that they received was nothing at all. We've literally had a phone call from a care manager saying, "Oh, just to let you know, as of Monday, Mrs. X will be on a direct payment. So send her the invoices." And you know, this made my heart sink, because that, you know, and no doubt the council will have ticked that one off as another service personalised. So I do feel quite cynical about the way that direct payments are being held up as evidence of personalisation, because my experience on the ground is that most people receiving social care in the sort of the generic home care model that is still prevalent are probably receiving much the same kind of service that they did 10 years ago. You know, the individual quality of the provider may go up or down, but the model hasn't changed, and the service that's being received hasn't changed, as I implied before. So, you know, personal budgets, yeah, good. It makes sense. It makes sense that the money should be allocated to the individual, and I think that probably makes sense in a health setting as well, with personal health budgets, although that's still early days, I guess. But yeah, a good thing, but not necessarily always used for good, if you see what I mean.
Okay, no, that's great. Thanks. Hey, do you want to just comment on this sort of balance of power in the health and well-being boards, and how you see that shaking out?
I think health and well-being boards, like any other organisation, will be based on personalities. So it could be that a local councillor is very dominant and articulate and open to discussion, and therefore they are the most important person to speak to, because the GP that sits on the board doesn't see you. This is where I think it really is about understanding the local environment and working with those in your organisation that are closest to the ground to understand the personalities involved. My first step would be to get the one person to speak to you. It doesn't matter who that person is, and then understand from there. Because it's never going to be cut and dried that this person is more influential than that. You've got representatives from housing, from the police, from secondary and primary care, and every area will have their own fiefdom. So it very much depends on who's sitting on that health and wellbeing board, and I would very much hesitate to say, you know, go for this person first.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's really going to be driven by the individual.
Yeah.
I'd like to just maybe also to you, Kate. I know you've mentioned, and maybe you're able to talk about this without mentioning the actual names. Some services that you've been looking at construction that looks at sort of, you know, combining certain outcomes with payments and bonus payments. Mm-hmm. And I guess Max, I think, puts his finger on it in terms of saying, gosh, it appears that the outcomes are changing from the softer ones into the economic space. And I guess it's fair to say, and we hear this in our discussions with commissioners and providers, is, you know, in the very long run, this will be, a lot of this will be centered around hospital avoidance, avoidance of residential care as opposed to home care. But there also feels like that kind of, a lot of people feel that that's where it's going to end up, but the journey to it isn't so clear. And I think you looked at a couple of services, maybe.
Yeah. Without going into specifics of where we're talking about, I think it depends on what perspective the commissioner is taking. So it could be a matter of gathering evidence and data that supports that doing X leads to a reduction in admissions, therefore the outcome that you're looking for is doing plenty of X. Or, depending on the length of the service that's provided or the outcomes that they're looking for, they may be looking for a direct impact on those admissions or A&E attendances. So that will very much depend on the stance that's being taken by those commissioners as they're developing through the process. And it's quite iterative. So you can be going through the process and start at one point in what's going to be required as an outcome and actually end up at something completely different. What is important is that you have to evidence what you're doing. So it's when you're going through these processes, it's not just a matter of what are the outcomes that are required, but how are you going to produce evidence that you're meeting those outcomes. Yeah, it's challenging.
But are you seeing an increase? So if you were to go to a commission and say, let's discuss these outcomes, and I'd also like to discuss how we get paid, because I guess what many providers are looking at, particularly from the home care side, is to get away from this track of the single focus being the cost per hour.
It depends, actually, how innovative you want to be. Some commissioners will hold a percentage back from the main budget and pay on hitting targets, or you could take it as far as gain share.
Yeah.
So if you've got something really innovative that you think could produce absolute benefits that might not even sit within the remit of that current bid, maybe there is a knock-on benefit to another area. If it's just a healthcare bid or just a social care bid, there could be a significant benefit seen through the other services. And if you can illustrate that and maybe get that service on board, there is opportunity for gain share. It's a challenge to get gain share agreed and get everybody around the table. Generally, it comes as a conversation with, yes, that sounds interesting, and we will get there in the end. And there are circumstances where you can get there in the end, but it's not something that I would assume right at the beginning of discussion that you can achieve. But there are significant opportunities in getting it. I think the way that commissioning has changed, looking back at sequins over the past, goodness knows how many years. Initially, sequins were, you had a pot, and then on top there was a bonus pot. So you hit your sequin, and then you get your bonus. And in recent years, it has become the pot is the pot. And if you want to get what it actually costs to deliver this service, you have to meet the sequin, otherwise we will withhold X amount. So things have changed considerably, and that's what our customers are dealing with, their sequence and their targets. So we are swimming in the same water. We've got the same environment and the same challenges to meet. So that's what we're talking about, really.
Max, I don't know if you, I think we're looking to wrap up in a minute or so, but any last thoughts on this, and I guess, attempts to get away from the squeeze of focusing exclusively on cost per hour, bonus payments, etc., etc. Any thoughts or advice you have on those points?
Yeah, scrap Trident and spend the money on social care. But that's probably there you go.
Point noted.
No, seriously though, yeah. I mean, look, we clearly need services and approaches that are going to be long-term and that are going to prevent people needing acute and high-level care. And we have to do that within a very constrained budget environment. And I do have confidence in, and exactly some of the stuff that MiHomecare are doing, and hopefully some of the stuff that we're doing as well. I think will be creative enough to tide us through some of this. But when one of the things that does bother me, and this will sound odd coming from one of the largest providers in the country, but I genuinely do believe that one of the most important things we need to do is to foster a diverse and varied care market. And at the moment, the commissioning environment is not really, I think, supporting that in most areas. We're seeing actually a consolidation. We're seeing big providers getting bigger, and we're seeing small and diverse providers struggling and often going under. And I think that is a real shame, because we won't have diversity and we won't have innovation if we don't have a lot of people in the game and a lot of people occupying a lot of different niches. And were I a user of care services, which, touch wood, I might be one day, just like any of us, I'd like to know that I can go out there and find a provider that will give me what it is that I want, rather than the only thing that's on offer. And at the moment, I'm not overly hopeful that will be the situation. But we need everybody who provides services to step up and come up with ideas, because nobody else is going to do it for us, I think.
That's great. Thank you very much, Max. I don't know, Kate, just before we wrap up, any last second thoughts?
Well, I would just agree with Max and the position from City and County. It's not just about one provider going in and sweeping up everything. We should be open to diversity, innovation, and that's special something that small provider around the corner has got. And as I said, with the larger challenges coming forward with joint and integrated commissioning, I think the actual volume of work in one contract is going to get bigger and bigger. So we need to look at opportunities and best ways of managing subcontract opportunities and looking at how we can work with other providers, maybe under a lead provider banner or some form of collaborative working. But just to assume that the larger companies can go in and sweep all aside is not the best thing for the caring environment.
Excellent. Well, look, I would like to thank Max Wurr from City and County and Kate Pym from MiHomecare. Thank you very, very much for really good insight. I guess for me, when the day comes that I'm in need of care, it will be a toss-up then between City and County and MiHomecare. Hopefully,
yeah.
hopefully, and we can hear another little laugh from you, Max. That's great. Hopefully by that time, the technology has moved on a bit. Commissioners are starting to really procure good quality care, and we're helping costs go down. So thank you to everyone who participated. Thank you for your questions. Just in terms of wrap-ups, if you have an idea for a next webinar or a great speaker, please do get in touch with me, ingolf.ernest@pshealth.co.uk. In terms of the webinar, we will put a copy out on our website in a few days' time. As a matter of fact, I'll try to get the link circulated so you can send that to friends and colleagues. And lastly, if you're interested, we've done a fair bit of white papers on outcomes and the measurement of that. Please get in touch with us. We'll also be obviously delighted to provide demos, maybe on a sort of a webinar thing of our PS Mobile platform. And phone numbers and contact details are all on our website. So thank you very much to everyone, and have a good day.